where we're going to be at today, as we're going to look at the next sign that Jesus or that John points to about Jesus being the Son of God, and we're going to be beginning in verse 1. And I think we're just going to just jump right into the passage this morning. And so if somebody wants to just start us off and read John chapter 6, verses 1 through 5.
After this, Jesus crossed the Sea of Galilee, or Tiberias. A huge crowd was following him because they saw the signs that he was performing by healing the sick. Jesus went up a mountain and sat down there with his disciples. Now the Passover, a Jewish festival, was near. So when Jesus looked up and noticed a huge crowd coming toward him, he asked Philip, "Where will we buy bread so that these people can eat?"
All right. So this is a real familiar story for us, a familiar miracle. This is one of those ones that, I don't know, I think we started getting taught this one when we're about this big, right? You know what I mean? This was one of those that's in every little children's storybook Bible, you know what I mean, that you may have ever had. And why is that, by the way? Why is this such a popular? I love the word story. My wife hates the word story. But why is this such a popular miracle? Why is this such a popular sign that we draw to for children, kids, for people of every age? Why are we drawn to this miracle so much?
Tangible.
What's that?
Tangible.
Okay. Yeah, it's tangible. It's something we can all relate to, right?
Visually see.
Yes. And it's an easy one, to kind of see it. You know what I mean? Kind of see it play out in our minds. What else?
It's just so cool.
All right. What's that?
Free lunch.
Oh, it's free lunch. Okay. Yeah, everybody loves a free lunch, even though my ag econ teacher was real big about the fact that there's no such thing as free lunch, right? So if you've ever been in econ, any kind of econ class, that's every econ professor's favorite thing. There's no such thing as a free lunch. There's always an opportunity. What am I doing? What am I talking about? Opportunity cost. Apparently that lesson took hold. I don't remember much else, but apparently that one took hold. But yeah, it's cool. It's big. It's grand. I think we kind of like it because in this moment, Jesus is popular. You know what I mean? People are drawn to him. I mean, we've got this huge crowd.
It's easy to talk about. Sometimes we don't want to talk about death, and so this is easier to talk to little kids who don't know about death yet.
Sure.
Because this is just food. This is just lunch.
Yeah, and there's a little boy in the story.
Yeah.
You know? And so it's very relatable for kids because we got a little boy in the story that has some remarkable faith. By the way, it's all of those things, and so we're just kind of drawn to it. I think for all of those reasons. I'm also kind of I like it's very tangible. It's very visual. You can kind of just picture it. You know what I mean? Very easily in your mind, and it's also one of those things where it's kind of like everybody's just kind of getting swept up in the moment. You kind of sense that. You know what I mean? It's like, Jesus is really kind of wanting, or maybe, I don't know if he's really wanting, but he's his intention, it looks like, is to kind of withdraw. You know what I mean? But yet the people are just like, no, we're coming. You know what I mean? And we're there, and they're just kind of, like I said, getting swept up in the moment, so much so that they're all out there in a remote area and they don't have any food. They don't have enough, at least, you know what I mean, to be able to meet what is going to be this great need. And then when we come to verse 5, and John says, therefore Jesus lifting up his eyes and seeing the large crowd was coming to him. The other gospel writers tell us, I think it's Mark especially, that says when Jesus looks out on them, he feels compassion for them. You know, that his heart goes out to them, and so he sees this huge need that is about to become a problem for these people that are there to continue to hear him teach and to hear him teach. And I think there's a big part of that, but I also think that at this point in his ministry, there's kind of this big sense that they're there to see what's next. You know what I mean? He's been healing, he's been doing a lot of miracles, and I think there's just this sense of, okay, what's next? You know, and we get a sense of that here at the end of the story as well. But he looks up, sees a crowd, has compassion for them, and then he turns to Philip and he says, where are we to buy bread so that all these may eat? How would you like to be Philip? Oh, Philip is the economist of the group? Yeah, apparently, and apparently he had some econ classes that took root too somewhere along, and that we're going to see here in a minute. But he's not the money guy, right? So other people, or at least it looks like in other situations, other people are handling the money. But Jesus turns to Philip and he says, where are we to buy bread so that these may eat?
Philip lived in that area too.
Okay.
So that's why one of the reasons.
One of the reasons is because he's from the area. He's from the region. He ought to have some insight as to what is available, what the resources are, all of those types of things. But we're going to learn a little bit more also about that here in the next passage. So let's go ahead and just read that. Somebody read verses 6 through 11.
He asked this to test him, for he himself knew what he was going to do. Philip answered him, 200 denarii worth of bread wouldn't be enough for each of them to have a little. One of his disciples, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, said to him, there's a boy here who has 5 barley loaves and 2 fish, but what are they for so many? Jesus said, have the people sit down. There was plenty of grass in the place, so they sat down. The men numbered about 5,000. Then Jesus took the loaves, and after giving thanks, he distributed them to those who were seated. So also with the fish, as much as they wanted.
Okay, so poor Philip, right? I kind of feel for Philip here in this whole situation, but because he directs the question to him, as we saw in the previous thing. He turns to Philip and he says, where may we buy bread so that they may eat? And maybe it's because Philip's from the area. And I think that certainly is a part of it, that he asked that question. But here in verse 6, it also gives us this information where it says, and he asked this to test him. How many of you think you would have passed this test?
Nope. You would think if they saw so many miracles already being performed that they would just assume or know that Jesus was going to take care of the
You would think, but man, I'm telling you, I wouldn't have passed.
They still have a veil over their eyes.
What's that?
They still have a veil over their eyes, even though they witnessed it. The veil is still there.
Yeah, there's certainly an element of that. I think also, though, Rick, they've seen miracles performed so far on much smaller scales. You know what I mean? They've seen miracles performed where, the first miracle was on a fairly large scale whenever we took care of a wedding party, you know what I mean? Which probably amounted to a small community. You know what I mean? That would have been there for that. But other than that, most of these miracles are very much individuals. We've healed an individual, or we've done this, or we've done that, and it's been small. But this is a big group, right?
Yeah.
The commentators will all tell you, we don't know how many for sure, but if there's 5,000 men, there's probably 20. There's probably 20,000 people. We're talking a small stadium worth. We're talking a small stadium worth of people here that all need to be fed. So I think that's part of it too. But what purpose does Jesus have in mind for asking Philip where to buy food to feed these people?
See where his faith lies. See if he's become faithful yet.
Okay.
Believe.
Yeah, I think obviously this is. It's a test of. It's a test of faith, but I think another way of putting it, a different way of saying it, maybe is that I think he's wanting to try to ascertain the depth of Philip's understanding with his level of faith. Okay, because I think the question. So I think there's a couple different things here. So why else? What else? What's the other purpose that Jesus has in mind for asking Philip, where are we going to buy food to feed all these people? What else? He's wanting to test his faith, but what else? What's the other purpose?
To see if he can get it done. See if he can figure it out what is going to be needed to feed these people.
Okay.
Prove it's not possible.
Okay. To prove it's not. Yeah, I think all of those things. But I think also, and it's not just for Philip, I think it's for all the disciples. Philip's the one that's going to get singled out, because the other thing that you have to keep in this balance is he asks this question and Jesus already knows what he's going to do. Jesus knows what he's going to do. He knows there's some bread and there's some fish. And I'm going to do a miracle, and I'm going to feed everybody. So he already knows this. So why ask the question?
Faith. Well, you have
Faith,
this.
but sometimes it's more than that, though.
You have this young child, this young boy, bringing 5 loaves of bread and fish, and in those days, that was worth a lot, and he was willing to go forth and share.
Okay. Now I just want to say that this 5 loaves of bread and fish is not a lot.
No.
This is a poor man's lunch. This is not enough to feed a person. We're not talking, when we talk 5 loaves, we're not talking these great big things that you all make. We're talking these little bitty.
Like pita cakes.
Yeah, we're talking little bitty things. And we're not talking like, some great big, halibut. We're talking sardines.
Yes.
So this was a poor man's lunch. This was a little boy's poor lunch. But there's a beautiful thing in it he's offering that he's going to offer it. So Jesus, but see, my point is Jesus knows all of this. He knows there's a boy. He knows there's these fish. He knows there's these loaves. He knows he's going to do this miracle.
Steve, I think about too, when he called them, I'm just thinking about the account when he first was calling the disciples, and he said, hey, let's cast this boat out a little farther. Mm-hmm. And he produced that great catch of fish.
Yes.
Kind of demonstrating not only his power, but his divinity at that moment, which was why one said, I shouldn't even be in this boat with you.
Yeah.
We're moving on, and now I really also think he's trying to pull from them, do you really believe I'm the Messiah? Do you really, how deep is that level of belief?
Yeah.
Not only faith, but do you really understand?
Right. Yeah, I think all that is true. But I also The other thing that I want to point out to you guys is I think he wants to teach them a lesson about ministry. He knows what's going to happen. He knows what he's going to do. But he wants to see, do you see the need? Do you have compassion? I've traveled with a Gilbert, I can tell you that for sure. Right? And if you don't know, Gilbert is my wife's maiden name. But anyway, they've never traveled with a Gilbert because, you've got to have everything, every meal, everything lined up, packed up. You know what I mean? You've got to plan for every possibility, right? And then when you get home, then you got to put away all that you didn't need. Right? So, stuff. That's what I said. Stuff. All that stuff you didn't need. But, that would have been my view a little bit. What are you doing getting out all the way out here in the middle of nowhere and you ain't got nothing to eat? Right?
I'm thinking Jesus went for 40 days without food. What's one day without food?
Right.
That's a start on a diet, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think, that's one of the things, too, I think that's hard for us because literally, we all went through the COVID thing and all that stuff. But literally, you could shut the door of my house right now today, and I could, if I didn't, I could live for a month on what we've got in my house. Probably longer. Miss Tish, their family they'd probably be good for a year just because of all the gardening and canning and everything. You know what I mean? Seriously, we have such an abundance of food all the time that we don't relate very well to this story. But I think a lot of the people in this story are very much living day to day.
In a lot of cases, one
To be even a little ways out without having, anything to eat or anything could have been almost a crisis situation for some of these folks. But I think the purpose in asking the question, it's all of those things. It's to ascertain the level of his faith. It's to ascertain the level of his understanding. But I think he's also just really trying to teach them about ministry. You've got to be able to meet the people's physical needs. And that's one of the things that Jesus is going to show through this miracle is that God is there to take care of our physical needs as well as our spiritual needs, as well as all these other needs that we have. He's concerned about every aspect of our life. And not just the big stuff. The things that we consider the big stuff. And so I think by asking him, I think that's what he's trying to see. I think that's what he's trying to get the disciples to see. Yeah, he wants to get their faith. He wants to grow their faith. Yeah, he wants to see what their level of their understanding is. But I think even more than that, I think he just wants them to see it's a lesson in ministry. It's a lesson in caring for people. Do they have compassion for this multitude? As he looks out upon these people, do they feel for them the same way that he feels for them? Or do they look at it as a nuisance? Because we get that a couple different times along the way, right? Where they're like, yeah, don't bother. Right. Yeah.
I don't remember which one that was, but...
Yeah. And so there's a couple different things there, right? So now let me move on to my next question I want to ask you about the test that Philip is facing here. What's Philip's perspective of the situation?
even with what
I heard somebody say something, but I didn't quite pick it up.
If it was me, I'd say, how am I supposed to do that?
Okay. Fair. And can only think in terms of how. Where can we get enough money and how? Right? Rather than affirming his belief and trust in the personhood, the power, and the ability of Jesus, which is unique because it's exactly what Philip said about Jesus in chapter 1, verse 45. Somebody turn back to chapter 1, verse 45 and say, what does Andrew say about Jesus that day?
Don't blame me. No.
What's he say? What's 145 say?
Philip found Nathanael and said to him, "We have found him."
What did he tell Nathanael?
They had found.
We've found him. We've found the one that Moses talked about, right? And so his understanding that day was, we found the Messiah. And he ties him that day to Moses. Well, what was one of the greatest miracles that God did during Moses' time?
Split the Red Sea.
Yeah, that's okay.
What
else?
Manna and quail.
Fed people. Miraculously fed a whole nation for years. I think that's why Andrew's getting brought into the conversation. Because early, Andrew's got the right answer. We've found him. We've found the one that Moses talked about. We've found the Messiah. Right? And so now it's like, okay, you got the answer right. Now, are you going to apply it today? Are you there yet? Okay. So how else does Philip see this? How else is he viewing this problem? Some of you would view this problem this way. What's his answer? What's his response?
We don't have the means.
We don't got any money. We ain't got enough money to feed all these people, right? And so he says 200 denarii worth of bread wouldn't be enough for each one of them just to have a little something, right? So basically he's looking at it and he's seeing an economic problem. Okay? See, I knew there was a reason I was speaking economics earlier today, right? He sees an economic problem. We ain't got enough money, and even if we could get money, it ain't going to be enough for everybody to get just a little bit. We don't have it. We have no place to get it. And even if they did, it wouldn't be a conversation, right? And what does Andrew come up with? Well, we got this little boy. And he's got some bagels and sardines. Right? That's what he's got. He's got some pickled oily fish, and the barley bread's just going to be enough to take the bad flavor out of it. Okay? But this is what he has. And so we got something, but it ain't enough. How's he viewing this problem?
Hopeless.
He's wanting Jesus to have. Like the wine, turn water to wine.
You would think he should, but I don't think that's what he sees. Because he says they're not enough. It won't be enough. And I think for Andrew, he's got a supply chain or inventory perspective. You see, because some of us operate in these realms, right? Some of us operate, well, we ain't got enough money. And so he too sees the prospect of meeting this need as, again, improbable and impossible, right? It's interesting how Jesus then responds. Don't you love how Jesus did this last week too, in the miracle we looked at last week. Don't you love how he doesn't often engage in much argument or debate with his disciples or those that he's teaching? Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? He just kind of puts it out there, puts it to the test, kind of gets them. And again, coming back to why test him? Why even ask this question? Why put the disciples through all this consternation and worrying about whether they're going to say the right thing or trying to see the whole thing when he already knows what he's going to do to begin with? Because he's wanting to teach them. He's wanting to prepare them for doing this without him. Right? It's the same thing whenever, you know, gosh, growing up on the farm, there were so many things. You know how much faster and quicker it would have been if my dad would have just done it? It's not right. Right? But it was a way of engaging and pulling me in and trying to get me to see if I could figure it out. To get me to get into the thought process, and then he would say, okay, well, that's all right, you know, and then he'd say, well, what if we did this, or, you know what I mean, drawing. It's all about teaching. It's all about doing all that, but Jesus doesn't verbally challenge either man. Instead, he just teaches them. He says, all right, here's what we're going to do. Make everybody sit down, and we're going to pack him a lunch. That's what happened here. Mom took care of him. Mom put a little lunch together for him because he said, hey, Mom, I'm going to go out here and see all this stuff. There's this really cool stuff that's happening, all these people around. And she's like, okay, well, I can't go with you, but here, take this brown paper bag, lunch, and I'm going to take care of this. I'm going to take care of this for you. But yeah, what else do you love about him?
His willingness to share.
Yeah. I love that too. I love that too because, and I love that it's a little boy. Get to go, oh, there's no way this is going to help, right? I mean, for most of us, we'd be like, well, this ain't going to help, right? And so we'd be reluctant to even give what little we have because we don't think it can help. But so I love the fact that this little boy has this child. He hasn't lost that childlike wonder, and I think that's one of the things that we see Jesus teaching several different times. The importance of having the faith of a child. You know what I mean? Where we don't lose that. Now, it's not to say that we don't, you know, later on Paul's going to say that, you know, when I was young, I did childish things, and now that I'm older, I've put away childish things. So it's not like, I don't know if it's really right or not, but it just was an interesting thing for me to think about. It's almost, is this one writer that I was reading said that he thinks that the little boy gave his lunch just for Jesus. As an act of worship. Just as it ain't enough for everybody, but Jesus could eat. You know, the one that's been doing the teaching, the one that's been doing this, you know what I mean? This, you know, the speaking, the one that's been doing all this stuff. And so I don't know if that, it was just an interesting thought for me to, you know what I mean, to think about. But I love the faith. I love the childlike wonder that, hey, what I have, I'm going to give. I'm going to offer it. It just blows up, right? So for Jesus, though, the solution isn't in increasing financial resources or enlarging the inventory, right? Inventory. Yeah, he is gonna do that. But see, here's the thing: the situation is calling for spiritual intervention, and I think there's a little lesson for us here. I think a lot of things that we pray about, I think a lot of times we break them down into economic things. We break them down to inventory, supply chain things. But I think at the root of a lot of them, the answer is spiritual. And Jesus has already He's already rejected economic, political, and even religious approaches to his ministry during his temptation in the wilderness. It's funny how this story really reflects those temptations. If you lay them beside each other and the parallels, turn this stone to bread, right? Look at all the economic power of the world. I'll give it all to you. Well, just fall down and worship me and all, you know what I mean? And we'll shortcut this whole thing that the Father had called you to. And so he's already faced all that, and he's already rejected all of that. And it's funny how there's some little parallels here. And in a minute, the people are going to see this great miracle, and they're going to go, let's make him king. And he's going to have to reject that again, too. And we can't think about, give us this day our daily bread. Right? And all of a sudden, there is no shortage of supply. That which was inadequate in the hands of a small boy, or even in the hands of Andrew, was more than sufficient in the hands of Jesus. And what do we learn about God through this miracle? There's a lot of things, but this is what I want to focus on, I guess. I'm running out of time, so I better just tell you what I want you to see. And they all ate until they were full. Okay? Remember early, we were worried about everybody just having a bite. Right? And now we're all full. So what do we learn about God in that?
He gives in abundance.
He gives us in abundance. And let me put it a different way. Our God is not stingy.
They had leftovers.
Yeah, and they're going to have leftovers, and that's for a whole other purpose. But what I want you just to see right now is our God is not stingy. Our God meets our needs, and he doesn't give us just enough. He lets us leave full. He lets us leave satisfied. Because, see, this goes all the way back to the original temptation of Adam and Eve in the garden. Being stingy. And the truth of the matter was God stingy with Adam and Eve? What did they have? Everything. They had this beautiful garden. They had all that they could ever have wanted, all that they could ever needed, right? But for some reason, Satan was able to get into their minds and get them to think that God was holding out on them.
One fruit.
What?
One fruit.
Yeah.
They were supposed to touch.
Yeah, but even in that, don't get me started. Don't get me started. They had 2 trees. 2 special trees. One they told don't eat of. The other one, which is knowledge of good and evil, let me try that one. Or there's this amazing thing happen if they just would have went and ate from that tree instead of the other one. But anyway, it's not the point. God isn't stingy. God isn't holding out on us. God is offering us his very best at all times. Okay? Now, does that mean that God answers every prayer and every need that we have exactly the way we want him to? No. But does that mean he's being stingy or holding out on us? No. That just means he's trying to direct us to another path. He's trying to direct us to something better. Or he's trying to direct us to where he wants us to be. Right? So, Jesus is the means whereby we can receive all of God's blessings. God isn't being stingy with us. God isn't holding out on us. God has met all. There won't be any need. There won't be any hurt. There won't be any pain. There won't be any death. There won't be any of that, right? And so all of that stuff is going to be taken care of. Okay? So, when they were full, he told his disciples, verse 12, collect the leftovers so that nothing is wasted. So they collected them and filled 12 baskets with the pieces from the 5 barley forced to make him king. He withdrew again to the mountain by himself. Okay? So, not only did he meet the need, but we've got 12 baskets full of reminders that we got to carry away with us.
And I wonder how that little boy felt after he had seen all of this from his lunch.
1 basket full for each disciple.
1 basket full for each disciple. Exactly. And there's a couple different things here with that. A couple things I want us to note, I guess, is it was that in that day and culture, the people that served always ate last. And I think that is another picture. Because, the little boy, Peggy, the wonderment of that little boy had to be pretty amazing. The wonderment of everybody in the crowd that day had to be awesome. But who experienced the greatest wonderment?
12 disciples.
I think it's fine.
Those that serve. Because the little boy, I kind of, little boys got short little attention spans. Right?
Mhm.
I think he was amazed. People were amazed. What was it like for those disciples as they walked around and saw that multiplication happen? I'm sorry. I just wonder, how did that happen? What did they see? What did they experience?
Baskets constantly being refilled each time someone took something.
Yeah, me. I'm weird. I have all kinds of questions. To begin with, what they had doesn't divide up equally among 12 different baskets to go around and distribute. Right? So I don't know exactly how that worked. But anyway, don't get sorry. You know how I get. But I'm just like, was it every time they reached in there was more? Or was it overflowing? Was it just, I don't know. But I just know this. Nobody had to be in more awe and wonder at the end of the day than those 12. Because they experienced it on a level that nobody else experienced it. And it was because they were the ones that were serving. Now, it was also because they were the ones that needed the greater lesson taught and all that stuff. You know what? I think there's a lesson in that, even in our church today. Those that serve get to see stuff happen. There's a lot of people in our church that aren't seeing anything. You know why? Because they're not in it. They're on the outside. They're on the fringe. They're just enjoying a good meal of barley bread and sardines. But they didn't help distribute. They didn't help clean up. They didn't get the benefit of getting to walk away with 12 lessons of reminders, because this had to be an ongoing reminder, because whatever God provides, nothing gets wasted. And I think there's a lesson in that too, that they ate this for the next, I don't know how many days. But those that serve are the ones that learn the most. They're the ones that get blessed the most. They're the ones that get to see God at work. And I think there's something for us to learn from that. But just how blessed to know that in our time to meet those needs, and sometimes in very unlikely, very improbable ways, He's not present to satisfy our every want, but He does provide. But what He does provide is sufficient, it's abundant, and it's free. And it's just another manifestation of His grace in our lives. His provision for us, no matter what area of our life, whether it be physical, emotional, spiritual, testifies that He is the divine Son of God. No problem is too great for Him. He can accomplish much with meager resources. Because honestly, you know what? For a lot of us, and I know even right now, even as I talked about serving there for much, there's a whole bunch of you that just like, that's ain't much I can do. What did you just see in this story? We look at our world and we think, I'm just one person. What can I do? There are so many needs. There are so many things.
Recent artist and making some Christian music.
Yeah.
And it's a song called Fishes and Loaves, because it's about the boy in this story.
Yeah.
And it does really get to the heart of it's not about how much you give, but it's about the fact that you gave it and Jesus did something with it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Steve, there's another thing here that really stands out to me. Is when Jesus gave thanks, he was giving thanks for not enough. You know, we can take something from that, and we can be thankful when we don't when there's not enough. And
Even when there's not enough. That's a great point.
It is, that's
Great point.
And it was incredible to see the community gather together to help those who've been impacted. And I just think, like, if every person in the community thought, I'm just one person, what can I do?